Welcome, Patreons. Welcome. Now, let's talk about Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson was the end all be all when it came to sports. The Zen Master. He is the most intelligent. Phil, the greatest mind. He thinks out of the box. Phil. He combined his Buddhist teachings with his basketball IQ. And willed people to championships with his great mind. Now, what's true here about Phil? Phil Jackson was a hippie. When Phil Jackson got to the Bulls, he basically was someone that never dressed up in a suit. He wore flannels. He was Kurt Rambis type of player. Played in North Dakota. Phil was rugged, scrappy, but he knew the X and O's. He was a pothead. And this doesn't just go through his hippie days. In his hippie days, he was getting up there with the Beatles, hitting that LSD. Now, throughout his career, Phil was looked at as the one you would go to for advice. He was wisdom when it came to basketball plays. But when he came to the Chicago Bulls as an assistant, he basically was coaching and running plays that Doug Collins was preaching about. But he was running these plays as it was designed to go towards the team rather than Michael and sharing the ball and spreading the ball around. They listened to it, but nobody really implemented these things. Doug had his set plays that he was going to run during the game because Michael loved those plays because at the end of it, the ball would be in Michael's hands. Phil wanted the ball shared just like Tex Winters. It ultimately cost Doug his job, but once Phil got in there and they started sitting with Michael saying this is what's going to happen on the team, Michael had to embrace what was coming next because of it. Now, We all know Phil, and you know, was dating the you know now owner of the Los Angeles Lakers, the daughter of Dr. Buss. We know this already. Now, when Phil was dating Maxine, his first wife, many things were left out of his personal life because Phil was a nice, quiet man, had a nice, supportive wife. And the worst thing happened to Phil Jackson. He became successful. Phil Jackson, once he won the first NBA championship, he became more full of himself. Now, when we speak on when you speak on Phil and his family and all of these things, he was a great dad. But his first wife, Maxine, well, now I take that back. With his second wife, because he married the hippie Maxine, and you know it was the second wife that pretty much did the trick. Because he was only married for like 3, 4, maybe 5 years. But once he got himself together, that's when things started to turn and take a turn for the better for him. You know, it was when he was dating Jenny Buss behind her back and cheated on his wife, who he's been with for about 20 years. That's where the problems ensued. Well, before we get there, let's get to how Phil Jackson torpedoed the Chicago Bulls. While everyone blaming Reinsdorf and Jerry Krause, I've often told you it was Phil Jackson. After they won the first NBA championship, Phil had more media attention. He's doing more interviews. People are trying to style him up because he had no style. He barely wore suits. Now he's being fitted for suits. He was a get one off the rack guy at the big and tall store. So now he's going to places and they're fitting him for suits because he has an interview, and he became addicted to this life of being on the camera. So just 2 years on the job, he was becoming different. When they won the second championship, he's talking about writing a book, and he's looking for a agent to represent him, and he's going to California to look at places because he might have to go back and forth to two places for work. because he's talking about his charity foundation where he's helping the children, all the kids, and he wants to get the Phil Jackson Zen Master thing, and he wants to have it where they put meditating into training, take time to just meditate and get their thoughts together, and everyone's looking at the Phil Jackson philosophy. He's a philosopher. That's the difference with him. It makes him a different coach. As this went on, his arrogance just grew with front office, with demands, and his attitude. He was a real arrogant person. He was no longer the "I'm very happy to be here" guy. So it's a difference. It's a major difference when you look back at your career and you say to yourself, man, I did a lot when no one even predicted for me to be here, but it soured with management when they kept trying to talk to Phil Jackson, and Phil thought he was bigger than the team. And they told him, I remember in an interview, he was supposed to thank Jerry Krause. Thank Jerry, make sure you thank Jerry Krause and Reinsdorf, the Bulls organization. And he didn't do it. It was for a promo by the Chicago Bulls. That was part. They were part of the sponsors for this interview with Phil Jackson, and Phil didn't do it. This was the first time they were thinking about making a decision on Phil Jackson. This was in 1990. I think it was 94. It's in 1994 after they won 3 championships. They're going for a fourth, and Michael Jordan's no longer on the team. Phil has become way too into himself at this time. He's calling more shots, he's more assertive. And when Scotty didn't want to go in the game and all of these things, all of these different analogies came to be. Phil just wants to torpedo this, he wants to do that. Phil Jackson became more and more full of himself, and he was changing. And his wife noticed. The wife is like, "Who are you right now?" Phil went and got his ears pierced, put an earring in his ear. He's hanging out in California a lot. And he's like, "Oh, I'm working with my charity. I'm doing this, I'm doing that." And it was straining his marriage. He wasn't making time for his children as much. He's doing autograph signings. The fame for Phil was getting just as big as it was for anybody else. The Bulls became theater. They were the good guys, everybody else were the bad guys. So people around the world are rooting for the Bulls to win. Not based on basketball, based on the storylines and themes. Now, with that being said, when we look towards where you want to go, like people say, well, what do you want out of this? Where do you want to go with this? Well, where I want to go with it is simple. Phil Jackson was never the type to say or do all of the things that you guys believe he could do. Phil was entirely different. Phil was a renegade, but one that was in control, so he thought. Phil started having lunch and was dating, well, wasn't dating, but going out on dates while he was married with another girl in California before he met Jenny Buss. Well, he knew of Jenny Buss before, but never really like that. Jenny Buss had a complex for older men, like her father. Phil was wise, like her dad, and she looked up to Phil and like, this is the guy I want. So her and Phil started fooling around. And Phil Jackson cut it off with the other girl that he was just go out on lunch dates and dinner dates with. And basically they got to the point where they didn't care if the wife found out. And that's what happens with people that cheat. And this was many years later. When Michael Jordan, I was going to say Michael Jackson, when Michael Jordan came back in 96, in the 96 Bulls run, and they were the best team in the NBA. And they went back to winning the NBA championship. Krause had told Reinsdorf that we got to do something about Phil. Phil Jackson is out of control. He's arrogant. He's blowing off interviews and meetings that are scheduled exclusively for the Bulls to do the promos. He's really blowing them off, trying to set times where he wants it. Wants people to come to his house to get things done. And, he's too arrogant right now. He's like, he's going to be held to control. And I don't know if we want to deal with Phil Jackson going forward. So to remove Phil Jackson was in place even then. Jerry Krause said, I knew we should have got rid of him when Michael first left. But then we would have never got Michael back, is what Reinsdorf said. We would have never got Michael back. And our numbers are going through the roof right now. We're going to ride this out. But at the end of it, Phil will be gone. Jerry wanted him gone. So as it got a lot of publicity, as they spun it going into their last season, Phil knew 2 years ago prior that he probably wasn't coming back. That his time was pretty much done, and he had offers from several teams in the NBA. Now, Phil liked to be quiet and keep himself in solitary confinement almost, where he could meditate and do all the things he needed to do, stretching exercises and all of these different things that he needed to move forward throughout his day. His ex-wife and all the things that they were going through, it had run its course. Phil was going through a midlife crisis where he wanted to kick back to the old days because he's been this grown-up man for so long. It has weighed on him and pulled him down like weights. So after that doesn't go in the direction they want, Phil decided he was leaving anyway. he had the Lakers deal all in place. Once he was through there, after a year, when they get rid of the coach, because that was going to happen, Kurt Rambis was just filling in so they can get Phil Jackson in there to run the team. That's what they wanted to do. By 98, Dennis had run his course. He was more into taking movie roles, book deals, and Jenny Buss wanted to get Dennis Rodman on the Bulls and get everybody basically on the Bulls onto the Lakers. The Lakers needed to be the new face of the NBA again. That's how she was thinking. We got Kobe, we got Shaq. It goes from Michael. He could pass the torch on to Kobe Bryant. He's going to be the face. Now, they offered Phil a deal. Phil was determined he wasn't coming back. Phil knew he wasn't coming back. He just wanted everybody to blame Jerry Krause because they had the meeting saying, he's out of here. Krause wanted to tell Phil Jackson he was fired. That meeting was everything for him. He couldn't wait to tell Phil Jackson early in the morning that no matter what he do that season or what the team do, they can win every game, win a championship. He will not be coming back to the Chicago Bulls. Phil knew right then and there, like, I'm already out of here. This is the last dance. That's what he named it. This is the last dance. This is the thing that ties this whole climatic thing together. This is the last run. And as they won the championship that last season, got their hand raised, and the team was just dismantled. Like, everybody was gone. It was like a rude awakening the next season. You didn't recognize hardly any players on the court. You're like, almost every player that was on the team the previous year was gone. And now everybody got to beat up on the Bulls. But it wasn't the same. And the flare was out. The candle that was lit was out. And like they say, you either get your perspectives right or you're going to suffer because of it. Look, Phil knew what he was doing. Phil was no dummy. He knew exactly how to play the people he cared about and get them to do the things he wanted to do, even Michael Jordan. He knew how to get Michael to do things that he wanted him to do. He knew if Michael was getting frustrated or just bored, he knew how to get Michael. He'd be like, tomorrow we're having a golf day. Free golf range. We have the day off for practice. We need a mental relaxed day. Everyone can do what they want. You don't have to go to the golfing, but we're going to go golfing tomorrow. And then Michael Jordan is like a kid in the classroom. Yeah! Yes! Tea time is 9 o'clock. Let's go play some rounds. Now, he knew he had to do that. And be like, well, we had a long day today. We got the day off. No practice tomorrow. We're going to just relax, sit around, just do some stretching exercises. Then we're going to play some poker. We brought some chips. We can relax. Yes! Yes! Yeah, Phil. Polka day. Oh, y'all gonna be here. I want your chips, your chips, your chips. Oh, man. So he knew how to get Mike sucked in. No, what they say, the narcissism. That's the thesis of what's going on around here. It's like there's major problems. People are not fixing the problems, and it's like you got this narcissistic behavior with these self-entitled people based on their success. The Bulls was like, we would rather part with you than to have you part of this organization again. Phil hasn't been back. Krause is no longer here, but Phil was so full of himself, he thought he could run a team with personnel and everything else. All he did when he was with the Lakers is bring in old Chicago Bulls. He had Horace Grant. They had Rodman on the team. I think Ron Harper even played over there. They brought in every old Chicago Bulls there were. So somebody who knew the operation and how things worked. And guys got championship rings. Sally got one with the Lakers. John Sally was over there. And at one time, it was going to be Shaq, Kobe, Michael Jordan, and Scottie Pippen, all on the Los Angeles Lakers. Kid you not. I kid you not. This was all lobbied. Of course, it didn't happen, but it definitely was lobbied out there. And we'll get into that at a later time. But yeah, Phil did all that damage. I'm out.